Hey podcaster, I'm Tim Alberg, your podcast performance coach, with another actionable tip so you can grow your podcast authority, generate leads, and convert with ease. Today's tip is stop pitching every podcast. If you've spent any time online lately, you've probably seen the ads.
We'll get you booked on 10 podcasts a month, 20 podcasts a month. We'll increase your visibility, 50 podcasts a month.
And I get the appeal. Being a guest on other people's podcasts is a solid strategy, and there are some very good podcast booking agencies out there. There are probably more terrible ones, but plenty of really great ones. And for the right person, they can absolutely be worth the investment. But before you get caught up in the numbers, I want you to ask yourself one question. Is more really better? Personally, I'd rather see you interviewed on 5 podcasts your ideal client actually listens to than 20 podcasts they'll never hear. Because appearing on someone else's podcast isn't just about getting your name out there. It's about building trust. It's about demonstrating your expertise. It's about giving listeners a reason to think,
I'd like to hear more from this brilliant, engaging, and funny person.
that's what sends them to your podcast. That's what actually builds authority. That's what creates opportunity. So if you want to get invited onto more of the right podcast, the first step isn't spamming as many podcasts as possible. It's being more intentional about who you pitch and how you pitch. Start by finding shows you actually want to be on. Listen to an episode or two and ask yourself a few questions. Do they even have guests? I know that sounds obvious, but we've actually done an entire episode about the number of guest pitches we receive for a podcast that doesn't even have guests. Listen to episode 125 if you want to laugh. The point is, you can't assume they have guests on their show or that they are going to want to talk about what you want to talk about on their show. Do the research. Next question to ask, is their audience your audience? Remember, you're not trying to collect podcast appearances like scout badges. You're trying to reach potential listeners and future clients. Make sure it's an audience fit before you pitch. Then ask yourself, are they a competitor? Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But if they serve exactly the same audience in exactly the same way, they may not be interested in bringing you on. They might. Many podcasters are totally confident and love to collaborate, but some guard their audience like a mama bear. Your best fit will be podcasts where the host offers a complimentary service or works in an adjacent space. And your final check in assessing if this is a podcast worth pitching is to see if they've covered your topic recently. If they publish an episode on exactly the same subject like 2 weeks ago, you're probably going to need a different angle. If it was a year ago, they might be ready to revisit it. Just do yourself a favor and listen to that episode so you can clearly lay out how your expertise can elevate the topic or provide a different perspective. So this is how to pick quality podcasts to pitch in 4 steps. 1, check that they have guests. 2, check audience fit. 3, check that they aren't a protective direct competitor. And 4, check your topic fit. You'd be surprised how many podcasts come off your list once you do this exercise. Heck, just listening to the show might drop them off the list because their quality isn't up to snuff. And that's a good thing, because now you're left with the shows that actually make sense and are aligned with your goals. The next step is one that almost everyone skips. Become part of their world before you ask for something. Follow them on LinkedIn. Subscribe to their newsletter, comment on their posts, reply to an email, listen to their show. I'm not talking about pretending to be their best friend for a week. I'm talking about becoming genuinely familiar with what they're doing. When your name shows up in their inbox, it's not completely out of the blue. Now, it's time to write your pitch. And here's where most people get it backwards. They start talking about themselves. I'm an award-winning blah, blah, blah. I've been featured in blah, blah, blah. I've spoken on blah, blah, blah. The host doesn't care, at least not yet. A good podcast host is thinking about one thing. Will this be valuable for my listener? So start there. Suggest 1 or 2 specific episode ideas, not broad topics, specific episodes. Instead of saying, I'd love to talk to you about leadership, try something like 3 leadership mistakes that quietly destroy team trust. Then explain in a sentence or two what their listener will walk away with. If you've noticed they've covered something similar before, acknowledge it and explain what's different about your angle. Now you've made their job easier. Then, after you've established the value, explain why you're the right person to have that conversation. That's where your experience, credentials, podcast, or expertise comes in. Then finish with a clear call to action so they know exactly how to say yes and get you booked. And don't forget to optimize your subject line. A subject line that says podcast guest inquiry looks like every other pitch in their inbox. Instead, hit the value. Something like podcast idea, 3 leadership mistakes that quietly destroys team trust. Or episode idea, why most morning routines fail. Give them a reason to open the email. Then, if you don't hear back, follow up in about a week. Just once. Keep it professional. Sometimes people are busy. Sometimes your email gets buried. One polite follow-up is perfectly appropriate. Now, I know this is not the most aggressive approach, and this way of doing things is the opposite of a hack or a shortcut. But here's the thing. The goal isn't to collect podcast appearances. The goal is to create podcast appearances that create opportunity. One great interview on the right podcast can outperform 20 mediocre interviews on shows that aren't reaching the people you actually want to serve. So be selective, do your homework, lead with value, and build relationships before you ask for invitations, because that's how you get on the podcasts that actually move your business forward. And I hope that's just the tip you need. If you're finding it difficult to explain why another podcast should have you on as a guest, there's a good chance you haven't fully clarified what your own podcast stands for. Who is it for? What problem it solves? Why should someone listen? That's exactly what I coach you through inside the Podcast Tune-Up program. Because when your positioning is clear, your guest pitches become easier to write, hosts understand your value faster, and you get invited onto the right shows for the right reasons. And as a bonus, your podcast delivers some real ROI all on its own. And if that sounds like something you, your business, and your podcast could benefit from, click the big orange button at podcastperformancecoach.com and book a free podcast coaching call. I'd love to help you turn your podcast into an authority-building, lead-generating machine. Book your free, private podcast coaching call by using the link in the show notes or the big orange button at podcastperformancecoach.com. I'm Tim Walberg.